couple of years later, I went to buy the box set of Peaky Blinders, and on the back it said, Cillian Dunkirk Murphy. And it's like, job done. Hello, I'm Christopher Nolan, the director of Oppenheimer, here with the cast of the film, and this is EW's Around the Table. I'd first heard about Oppenheimer when I was a kid. We were talking yesterday about that Sting song, Russians.
Yeah.
You know, it refers to Oppenheimer's Deadly Toys. I was growing up in the UK at a time when people were very concerned about nuclear armaments. You know, it was protests at Greenham Common, all of that, campaign for nuclear disarmament. And I think when I was 12 or 13, I think myself and all my friends were absolutely convinced that we were going to experience a nuclear war at some point in our lives. And then over time, that fear recedes, and Oppenheimer stuck with me as a figure. And I learned more about him over the years, including learning this information that, you know, he, along with the key scientists of the Manhattan Project, they couldn't completely eliminate the possibility of starting a chain reaction that would destroy the world. And for me, that was kind of the hook. It's such a dramatic moment. I referred to it in my last film, Tenet. I'm just very interested in taking the audience into that room and being there and kind of living in that moment of what would that have been like to push that button knowing there was any possibility in that.
We imagine a future, and our imaginings horrify us. They won't fear it until they understand it. And they won't understand it until they've used it.
Did you guys get the 3 dozen yellow roses 2 days in a row? No? Mine was a slower courtship process because he knew for sure I was going to say yes no matter what. I went over to his house. I read it. I don't want to complain, but it's on red paper printed in black, which is kind of difficult.
And a bit unnerving as well.
Yeah. I guess there's something about it that makes it that you forget it as soon as you read it. I don't know what those colors are. It's kind of like being hypnotized. This is how you get what you want.
Chris's the way of operating is that he just calls you out of the blue. I think you enjoy that. Certainly for me, it just came completely out of the blue. And Emma called me and then put me on to Chris, and he said he was making a movie about Oppenheimer, and he said, I'd like you to play Oppenheimer, and I had to sit down, and it was kind of overwhelming.
Which is a fun way to do it, but it means that in the future it's very difficult for me to call you to go out to dinner or something. So here
like,
you answer the phone, like, what's it going to be?
This is going to sound made up, but it's actually true. I had, not to get too personal, but had negotiated extensively with my wife that I was taking time off, and I actually had enough foresight. I had been in Interstellar, and then Chris put me on ice for a couple movies, so I wasn't in the rotation.
He just wasn't very happy with
but I
your
actually
performance.
negotiated in couples therapy. This is a true story. The one caveat to my taking time off was if Chris Nolan called, and this is without knowing whether or not he was working on anything, because he never tells you. Like Cillian, he just calls you out of the blue.
Yeah.
It was a moment in my household, but
So even modern psychology has a caveat
for Chris.
Just checking. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
I didn't know the process, right? So I didn't know if you were meeting sort of countless other people. So we talked for an hour or so, and then he's just very casual, and he goes, so, you know, it's a part of his wife, and, you know, would you like to take a look? And you're like, is this an offer? You're just like So then I went into the living room, read the script. It was just so heart-racing. It was so awesome.
It's that thing. You read the script, it's written in the first person, you're transported, and it's a journey to read it. And then at the end of that, the guy who wrote the script you just read is asking you if you want to do it.
I actually had a little bit, I was so blown away by the script. Again, as Robert says, it's in the first person, which I'd never seen before. So rather than say, Oppenheimer crosses the room, it says, "I walk across the room," in the present tense. So it has that, it has a visceral effect on you, and it pulls you right in, and which is the point. He's trying to tell his readers, aka just us and his crew, this is the feeling of the movie. It's got to go through the subjective lens of this character, and that's what it entirely rests on that. And I was so kind of floored by how good it was that the only thing I said, he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I have no notes."
So snobby.
Which to me is
snobby.
It's the highest compliment you can pay.
No, it's a terrible,
and Chris was so
reductive thing to say.
When Emily read it and M was gushing about it and she was very articulate, Chris said, "Well, it's better than what Matt said." But I was trying. I was, because you're a little stunned when you go. I have no notes. I don't know what to say to you. I can't believe this is amazing. Which is, how I felt watching the film as well.
We're in a race against the Nazis. And I know what it means. If the Nazis have a bomb.
We have a 12-month head start.
18.
How could you possibly know that?
We've got one hope. All America's industrial might and glory. Keep everyone there until it's done.
Let's go recruit some scientists.
Build a town, build it fast. If we don't let scientists bring their families, we'll never get the best.
Why would we go to the middle of nowhere for who knows how long?
Why? Why? How about because this is the most important thing to ever happen in the history of the world?
You're the great improviser, but this you can't do in your head.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
Chances are near zero.
Near zero.
What do you want from theory alone?
Zero would be nice.
I mean, we always knew that the Trinity test would have to be a showstopper. It's the fulcrum that the whole story turns on. And when I finished the script, one of the first people I showed the script to was my visual effects supervisor, because I wanted to take CG off the table and see if, he could come up with real world methodologies for producing the effect of, the first atomic blast. But even more than that, I wanted him to see how we were going to try and look into Oppenheimer's mind and see his thought process of, as I put it, sort of looking into dull matter and seeing energy there and seeing the potential of the strong force there to be unleashed on the world, and sort of draw that thread with symbolic imagery and visualizations of the quantum world and everything. So Andrew Jackson, I've worked with for several films. He won an Oscar for Tenet. I've worked with him for years, and he understands both the computer world, but he also understands the analog world. He's wonderful with that. And so he spent months and months and months doing all these experiments and figuring out all these methods, some very, very small and microscopic, some of them absolutely colossal. And then the process of going out to the desert, with Ruth de Jong building the bunkers as they would have been so that we could shoot in the middle of the night in the desert in the real places and get these guys there to really experience some measure of what that tension would have been like that crazy night, sort of building up, and the weeks before building up, worrying about the weather. We're very fortunate the weather did all the things we needed to do. It got crazy when we needed to get crazy. On cue. On cue. It was really
hypnotized.
It was really wonderful.
It happens for you a lot, doesn't it?
I'm rumored to be lucky with weather. I think we make our own luck though, because we always shoot no matter what the weather.
Yeah.
We don't stop. We don't wait. I mean, on Interstellar, they kicked us off the glacier finally, and we shot in the car park. And the shot, which you said wouldn't be in the film, is actually
it's in the movie. You were right. You were right.
But that's the thing is we're always prepared to try and use what nature gives us, give us a real texture. And in the case of the New Mexico desert, it just paid such dividends. I mean, that weather that came in, as you guys are doing the scene by the wooden wall with the initial test detonation, and we had to suddenly wrap because lightning came over, but the clouds that came over, I mean, all of it just informs the whole, the whole drama of the piece. And the build up to Trinity is the key. It's really all about the tension leading up to it and what the process that they went through. And I was very blessed that the designer, Ruth de Jong, and Scott Fisher, the visual effects supervisor, when we were trying to make our budget work and all that. And it's sort of like, well, what do you need to see of the gadget itself? And I was like, well, we only see it in these shots and those shots. And they ignored that completely from me, and they built the entire thing in exacting detail so that we were then free to shoot the entire process. You know, the shrink wrapping on it as it comes up in the truck that gets cut off, the way that the different modules are inserted in and wired up. And we were able to build the tension up to the detonation by showing that process that they went through. And I think it's so important. And that's what you get. I mean, you know, obviously with wonderful actors coming on and bringing, you know, new takes, new thoughts, new research to everything, particularly dealing with real people. But I had that from every department. I had that from, you know, from Ruth and from Hoyter, the director of photography, everybody coming with ideas and knowledge about how this could work better. And that sequence is built on those building blocks.
This is a peculiar way that Chris works. You don't see a frame of the film while you're shooting. There is no video village, there's no monitors, there's no playback, which is weirdly liberating. You know, you're never reflecting, you're just moving forwards all the time. So I hadn't seen a frame of the film except for that little teaser that you guys put out, and then I saw the movie. How do I kind of phrase this properly? It was absolutely staggering. I found it absolutely staggering, and it was like I was kind of emotionally winded. You know, I mean, it's not great looking at yourself, but you can get over that when the film is as brilliantly constructed and made as this film is. And I remember we just talked and talked for hours after it, and it seems that everyone who's watching the film, it kind of provokes that very, very intense debate among people that have seen it, because the themes that it's interrogating are just the biggest themes of all, you know, and it's as Matt said, like, it's so visceral, and it kind of grabs you by the throat, and you're just in it for the whole run. Yeah, I was a little overwhelmed, still recovering.
There's English modesty, and then there's Irish Cillian. It's been really difficult to try to get through to you what an amazing thing you accomplished. And I know it's important for us to kind of separate from that because that's not what matters, but well done, brother.
Thanks, man. We all did it.
We did.
No, don't.
We did.
But from the outset, the very first thing Chris said to me when he talked to me about it was, you know, the book that it's based on is an amazing book. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It's called American Prometheus. And Chris said, I'm not calling the movie that. I'm calling it Oppenheimer, because that's what this is. And this thing rides on that character, on him, on that performance, and I need actors in support of that. That's the mission, and those were kind of our marching orders. And so watching the two of them, really, because I do think of it as a partnership. When you're putting something of this scale on the back of one performance, the director and actor have to be in complete sync, and it has to be a partnership. Chris has to put the camera in the right place, and Cillian's got to, you know what I mean? It's like they both have to be working in concert, and that was what was really fun to watch. And it was great to parachute in and watch that, as Robert says, this kind of holy monastic kind of mission that these two were on together, and to bear witness to it, because it really is one of the great screen performances, I think, of all time.
Yes.
Well, on your last day, you took me aside and said, you realize what this guy's doing every day. He's killing for you, but with good humor. And do you understand how exhausting that is, how difficult it is? And you mustn't take that for granted. And I thought about that, and I was like, nah, he loves it.
Yes. Truer words will not be. Yeah, there's a difference between organized, focused, and controlled. And I think all of us can say we've worked with a director or 17 in the past that may confuse those. And it's about control. And I never saw a mark on the floor. I was never told what to do or not do. I was more than occasionally asked to do nothing, which is a really interesting bit of feedback, because I think there's still some part of me that wants to please the director by doing something. And I think also you knew, because of how rich the format is, how much of the work was going to be done. So it really was a trust exercise in letting the story, the text, and I mean, you know, all of us are blessed that we had scenes with someone who was in, you guys were in a zone together, given the history you had that was so fascinating as to this holy monastic grind you guys were in. But you were kind throughout, so you go like, I have nothing to complain about here. This is really weird.
What's this new feeling of peace?
There was as little makeup as required. I've just gotten older. Can we cut that out? There was a lot of stipple.
Stretch and stipple.
Yep, a lot of that. A lot of that. I mean, my wife said, great, now I see what I'm getting in 15 years.
I knew Cillian from Quiet Place 2, so of course I called him and I said, like, what's it like? Come on, tell me. And he just said, you're going to just love it. You're going to love it. It's so focused. There's no chaos. It's very giving. It's collaborative. And how amazing he was with actors. And I think that is the great beauty of what Chris does, is that there are directors who are led by the visuals, or there's directors who are pretty good with actors, but you just never find that where someone is just sort of as mirroredly brilliant at both. So I was excited about the focus of it. I think I was excited about the screws getting tightened on everybody and what that atmosphere will feel like on a film set. It's also, the other thing he gives you is that you feel safe. And I think usually you're on a film set where you might not like the script that much, or you just kind of don't really trust that scene or that note or that thing. And there's none of that. All of that just gets kind of washed away. And it gives everyone wings on their heels. You know, it just makes people perform at a level that we're trying to kind of match what Chris does. And yeah, the screws tightening, that's the feeling I loved so much.
Every day with Cillian, I would preface it by saying that. I was just marveling at what he was doing and not doing and all of it. And then I was very genuinely surprised with Jason Clarke, who plays Roger Robb. The first time I sat in that room and was cross-examined by him, and he just started.
He's so lethal.
Lethal is the perfect word. He's fantastic and
intimidating.
And it was just, it was great. And I looked at him and I went, okay, this is, you know, and I completely I'm a general. I wasn't worried about him at all. But I looked at him and went, this is, you know, and that was the thing, is that every actor goes there very prepared, very, I think, excited, probably a little nervous to be working with Chris, and you feel it when you walk on the set. You feel it throughout every department, and you know, it's like this is the place, and you're at it, and that's really exciting.
This is a matter of life and death. But I can perform this miracle.
It's happening, isn't it?
The world will remember this day.
I mean, I had so much with Cillian, who was so transporting to be in a scene with and just pulls you right inside of it, you know, whatever the scene is. He can take a slap, I'll tell you that much. I mean, I really didn't want to hit him, you know, and Chris was like, hit him, he'll be fine. And I could see his rather famous cheekbone just sort of start to grow, like even more on one side by the end. That scene I really enjoyed, where it's a really difficult scene for Cillian to play, you know, where he's literally sort of gibbering with incoherence and he's having an episode, and it was just so raw and emotional, and it was one of those days where I think we were losing the light, and it was like, but Chris doesn't kind of let you feel the chaos, but I think we knew, you know, that we had to get it, and it was just a very heated, exciting scene, and to see this great man, this powerful man, so delicate, so vulnerable, it's just the full spectrum of what Cillian can do, you know.
And can I just say, like, when in that scene in particular, I don't know if I'd been able to get to that place, if it wasn't for working with Emily, because you need that level of trust for a scene like that, you know. And I think the fact that we know each other, and she's such a phenomenal actor, that we were able to go there, you know. And I think the trust, you know, with Chris and trust with Emily. Mm-hmm. And in terms of, for me, like every day, I was working with the best actors in the world, you know, every single day. And you know, you look at the call sheet, it would be like Gary Oldman one day, and then Ken Branagh, and then these guys. You know, it was very hard to be cynical when you're working with that level of talent.
Working with Florence was amazing. I mean, I'd followed her work over the last few years. I was really excited to work with her. and I had no idea what that would be like. But, you know, I mean, I think she's just a wonderful presence. And
Yeah.
I feel like you guys connected immediately.
I
think I did with her as well. I just found her to be extraordinarily, well, very professional, but what a talent. I mean, what a presence.
Yeah, it's her presence. She has this incredible presence on screen and in person.
Super charismatic.
Yeah, so charismatic.
And a very tough role.
Yeah.
Very precise.
Yes.
The screen time, short, but so important in Oppenheimer's life. I mean, just really the root of so many things that then happened in his life later on.
The four of us were sitting around last night, the actors here, and Robert said, you know, apropos of nothing, he said, you know, this next generation coming behind us is really good.
Yeah.
You know, and she's leading that group.
Yeah.
She's really, really great.
Present company excluded, every scene I had was with Alden Ehrenreich and Scott Grimes, and Alden and I literally, because you put us at close quarters, we're kind of like good friends now and stayed in touch, and it's always great when that happens. And then in watching the film, I was just reminded of how good Casey Affleck is.
So good.
I was like, that may be one of the coolest couple scenes I've seen in a decade.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Rami Malek comes in for one day, and it was an absolute mic drop moment. So it almost transcends this sense of we're making each other better because of competition. It was almost like you were participating in and watching 3 generations of actors all come in kind of, and almost like with a summer stock level of, hey, let's there's a barn, let's make a show, and let's do it for Maestro. There's this show I used to watch on the History Channel. It's called Man, Moment, Machine. The moment was when we shot this thing, and I'm sorry, but you are the machine. As is the format you used.
I was surprised every day somebody would bring something new to the table, and that's the joy of working with a great cast, and then giving them the authority in the room to play, because it's a true story, so they can do the research, they can find out about their characters. And I think for me, one of the more invigorating sequences is the GAC meeting, where Louis Strauss calls the meeting, comes late at night, and then we did a lot of improvisations with that, with Dane DeHaan and Matthew Modine and everyone. And I don't know if you remember where he got Dane to just go very over the top to prompt a discussion and prompt a different set of directions in it. And that was a really, really interesting scene to watch everybody contribute something. From Josh Hartnett to Matthew Modine to Dane DeHaan to these guys, just bringing something literally to the table in that scene around there. I really, really enjoyed that sequence.
Our work here will ensure a peace mankind has never seen. Until somebody builds a bigger one.
You are the man who gave them the power to destroy themselves. And the world is not prepared.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Truman needs to know what's next.
2.
What's next?
1.
People who know nothing about Oppenheimer are going to get the most out of the film, I think. When I read American Prometheus, it just started to discover all of these stranger than fiction aspects to his story and the complexities of it. And there were things that you just would never put in a script as a writer of fiction. It wouldn't be credible. But the real story has those kind of extraordinary moments. But what we talked about right from the beginning is not an impersonation.
Yeah.
We're not making a documentary. Yeah. Our responsibility was to interpret and to produce our interpretation of the character and of the events.
Yeah. Like when you think about what he lived through, the journey of the story of his life, it's kind of staggering. It was this mad kind of confluence of politics and science and war. It was the most exciting and terrifying time to kind of live through. And the story of his life is fascinating. That's obviously why you thought it would merit a movie.
Yeah, and I think the connection, one of the first things I grabbed a hold of from the book, as I was reading it the first time, was the moment you realize that Los Alamos, you know, which would become so important in history, is just this place that he and his brother like to go camping. And that connection, the personal with the historic, I thought was really engaging.
Yeah.
Many people will say this is your greatest film and a culmination of aspects of every film you've ever done. It's almost like Good Will Hunting. You've made this equation where you're now at the end of the chalkboard and what the heck would you do next? But we believe in you, sir. So my favorite film of yours is whatever the heck you do after this, because you better come up with something amazing.
Great answer.
You're in all of them.
No, I'm not. No, I remember seeing Interstellar in the IMAX on my own. And I just remember coming out like in a terrible state. Just it was so emotional, and you know,
Did
my
no
kids
one else
were
want to watch it with you? Did you?
I love escaping from the house.
Okay.
My kids were little, but you know, it's so emotional that movie. That it always gets me. That movie every time.
I love Dunkirk. I love Dunkirk. I've seen that like 20 times.
I want to make the case for Dunkirk, because when I sent Cillian the script, he wasn't entirely enthusiastic about playing the character I'd sent. And you actually called me up and were like, sure, I'll do it, you know, because I want to work with you, but couldn't I be a Spitfire pilot instead? And I said, no, but I need you out on that boat. I know that it's an experimental script, it's not fully formed, but, you know, come along and we'll find it together out there on the water with Mark Rylance.
Why do I always have to be the horn?
It was a little bit of that, and you know, so I convinced you, and then you're out on the boat and you're diving in the water off the wreck and doing all this like stuff and feeling more and more miserable about it all. But cut to a couple of years later, character doesn't even have a name, all that. A couple of years later, I went to buy the box set of Peaky Blinders, and on the back it said Cillian Dunkirk Murphy. And it's like, job done.
My wife and I watched The Prestige, I think 4 days in a row when it came out. I love Inception as well. That's kind of an impossible question. It's like saying, what's your favorite Hitchcock movie? Ben and I, growing up, we went to 2 movies every weekend. That was what we did, sometimes more. I heard about this, you know, with Oppenheimer and Barbie open, and I thought, you know, I think it's great. I'm glad that we're putting great options back in the multiplexes. It's, thank God, after COVID. I'm glad everyone's going back to the movies, and just go see them both and have a ball, you know, and whatever order you want to do it in. It's great that there are great options again for people. We want our business to come back strong.
Thank you for joining us. This has been EW's Around the Table.